Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Enjoy the listening. The mythical battleship was real, and it came for revenge. Captain James Miller stood at the viewport of Waypoint 37, staring into the endless dark of space. The small frontier outpost hung at the edge of human territory, a lonely sentinel watching the stars. Most officers saw assignment here as punishment, but Miller had requested it. Out here, away from the bustle of the central worlds, he could pursue his true passion. "Captain, you've got another package," said Lieutenant Davis, dropping a small container on Miller's desk. "All the way from Earth this time." Miller turned from the viewport, his weathered face brightening. "Finally, I've been waiting months for this." He opened the package carefully, revealing an old metal badge. To most, it would look like junk, a piece of scrap, but to Miller, it was treasure, the faded insignia of the Third Deep Space Fleet, active during the HFY War 3 centuries ago. "Another addition to your collection of fairy tales?" Davis asked with a smirk. Miller didn't take offense. The younger officers always mocked his hobby. "History, Lieutenant, not fairy tales." "The retribution is a myth, sir. Every Academy cadet knows that." Miller picked up the badge, feeling its weight. "That's what they teach now, yes. But myths often have roots in truth. The story of the retribution was known to every child who dreamed of the stars. During the darkest days of the war against the lizard-like Varians, humanity built a superweapon, a battleship unlike any other. It was said to be the size of a small moon, carrying weapons that could destroy planets. In the old stories, the Retribution fought a final battle against the enemy fleet, and both disappeared, never to be seen again. Official history called it propaganda, invented to boost morale when humanity was losing the war, but Miller had spent 20 years collecting evidence suggesting otherwise. "Messages for you, Captain," called the communications officer. "One from your wife and another. Strange one." "Strange how?" Miller asked, walking to the communication station. "It came through on an old frequency. Very old. And it's repeating." Miller leaned over the console, feeling his heart beat faster as he saw the signal pattern. "This frequency hasn't been used since the war." "What war?" asked the young officer. "The HFY War, before the peace treaty." Miller studied the signal. "Can you clean it up?" After several minutes of work, the static resolved into a clear pattern. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, an ancient distress code. "Where is it coming from?" Miller asked. The officer checked his instruments. "The dead zone, sir, grid 19-7. The dead zone, a region of space avoided by all ships due to strange sensor readings and rumors of vanished vessels." Miller had always wondered what secrets it held. "Sir," said Commander Alex Taylor, Miller's second-in-command, "you're not thinking of investigating that signal, are you?" Miller was already walking toward the command center. "I'm not just thinking about it, Alex. I'm doing it." Taylor followed, lowering her voice. "With all due respect, sir, that's crazy. The dead zone is off limits for good reason, and this signal is probably just interference." 3-3-3 is not random interference," Miller replied. "Someone set that signal to repeat, and it matches accounts from my research." Taylor sighed. She was a good officer, practical and by the book. She had served with Miller for 5 years and respected him, but his obsession with the retribution was the one thing that worried her. "Sir, even if, and that's a big if, there's something there, we need authorization from command." Miller nodded. "I'll request it immediately." 3 hours later, Miller stood before the holographic images of 3 admirals. He had presented his case, showing the signal and its match to historical records. "Captain Miller," said Admiral Grant, "your request to investigate is denied. Waypoint 37 is a monitoring station, not an exploration vessel." "Admiral, this could be the greatest historical find of our time," Miller argued. "It could also be nothing," said Admiral Long, "or worse, a trap. The Varians may be our allies now, but there are still rogue elements who remember the war." Miller tried one more approach. "What if it is the retribution? The technology on that ship would be centuries ahead of even our current level. We can't let that fall into the wrong hands." The admirals exchanged looks. Miller had touched on their real fear. "Very well," said Admiral Grant finally. "You may take a small team to investigate, but at the first sign of danger, you withdraw. Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear, Admiral." "Thank you." As the transmission ended, Miller found Taylor waiting. "We're going, aren't we?" she asked. "We leave in 6 hours. Prepare a team, 5 security officers and 2 engineers." "This is a mistake," Taylor said, but she was already mentally selecting the crew. Miller returned to his quarters and opened a locked drawer in his desk. Inside was his most prized possession, a handwritten journal supposedly from a survivor of the Retribution's last battle. Most experts had called it a fake, but Miller had always believed. He opened it to a dog-eared page and read the familiar words. Should anyone find this account, know that we did not fall in battle. We were betrayed. The ship lives, though damaged beyond repair. We sleep now in the cold between stars, but we will return, and we will have our revenge. Miller closed the journal. For 20 years, he had searched for proof that the Retribution was real. Now he might finally find it. 6 hours later, their small ship left waypoint 37, heading toward the dead zone. As they approached the coordinates, sensor readings became erratic. Something's interfering with our systems, reported the engineer. Keep going, ordered Miller. Taylor looked nervous. Sir, if our sensors fail completely, we'll be blind out here. Sometimes you have to trust more than sensors, Commander. As they pushed deeper into the zone, a massive shape began to appear on their view screen. Just a shadow at first, blocking the stars. But as they drew closer, the outline became clear. A ship, the largest any of them had ever seen, old and battle-scarred, but unmistakably human in design. My God, whispered Taylor, her doubts evaporating. It's real. Miller stared at the massive vessel, emotion tightening his throat. There, emblazoned on the hull in faded letters, was the name he had searched for his entire career. Retribution. Not just real, Miller said quietly. It's alive. As if in response to his words, lights began to flicker along the ancient battleship's hull, waking after centuries of darkness. Approach with caution, Miller ordered as their small scout ship edged closer to the massive battleship. The Retribution hung in space like a sleeping giant, its hull scarred with the marks of ancient battles. No response to our hails, reported Lieutenant Davis from the communication station. If there's anyone alive in there, they're not talking. Commander Taylor studied the sensor readings, her earlier skepticism replaced by professional concern. The ship's power systems are active but minimal. Life support appears to be functioning in some sections, but at very low levels. Miller couldn't take his eyes off the view screen. The Retribution was even more impressive than the stories described. Nearly 2 kilometers long, with weapon ports that could house cannons bigger than their entire scout ship. This was a vessel built for one purpose, to end a war. I'm detecting a docking bay on the starboard side, said Officer Wilson, their pilot. The doors are partially open. We could slip inside. Do it, Miller said. Slow approach, no sudden movements. If that ship's defense systems are still active, we don't want to trigger them. Their scout ship glided toward the ancient battleship, passing through the partially open bay doors into a cavernous hangar. Emergency lights flickered dimly, casting long shadows across rows of fighter craft. Designs no one had seen in centuries. These ships are perfectly preserved, Taylor whispered, awe evident in her voice. Look at the technology. It's nothing like our historical records. When they landed, Miller divided the team. Taylor, you and Davis check the bridge. Wilson, take the engineers to the engine room. I want to know what's keeping this ship powered after all this time. The rest of you come with me to find the crew quarters. They sealed their environment suits. The air aboard the Retribution might be toxic after centuries, and entered the silent corridors of the legendary battleship. Miller led his team through hallways that seemed to stretch forever. Unlike the smooth, white corridors of modern ships, the Retribution's passages were industrial, built for war rather than comfort. Occasionally, they passed signs of battles, scorch marks on walls, sections where emergency bulkheads had sealed off breaches. Captain, look at this, said Security Officer Patel, pointing to a sealed door marked CRY01. Miller's heart raced. The journal he'd read had mentioned the crew entering cryosleep. Can we get this open? The team's engineer, Dr. Foster, examined the control panel. It's an old system, but I think I can bypass it. After a few minutes, she announced. Got it. The door slid open with a hiss of escaping air. Inside was a large chamber filled with rows of cryopods, each containing a human form. Frost covered the transparent tops, making it difficult to see the faces within. Are they alive? Patel asked. Foster checked a still-functioning terminal. According to this, yes. The pods are all in working order. These people have been in suspended animation for over 300 years. Miller approached the nearest pod, wiping away the frost to reveal the face of a young officer, his expression peaceful in frozen sleep. They survived, he whispered. All this time, they were here waiting. Miller's radio crackled. Captain, this is Taylor. We've reached the bridge. You need to see this. 20 minutes later, Miller stood on the bridge of the Retribution, staring at holographic displays that shouldn't have been possible with the technology of that era. The ship's AI is still functioning, Taylor explained. It's been running on minimal power, maintaining life support for the cryobays and watching for something. Can we communicate with it? Miller asked. We've been trying, but it's not responding fully. I think it's defensive. It doesn't recognize us. As if in response to her words, the holographic displays flickered, and a computerized voice spoke. Unidentified personnel detected. Security protocols engaged. Identify yourselves or face defensive measures. Miller stepped forward. I am Captain James Miller of the Human Alliance Starship Waypoint 37. We are human, like the crew of this vessel. Genetic verification required. The AI responded. A beam of light scanned each of them. Human genetic patterns confirmed, but uniforms and equipment do not match records. Temporal anomaly detected. Current stardate verification required. Miller gave the date according to the standard calendar. There was a long pause, then, data indicates a temporal displacement of 327 standard years, awaiting command authorization to proceed. We don't have command authorization, Taylor said quietly. We're not from their time, Miller thought quickly. Computer, we are descendants of the human forces you were designed to serve. We detected your distress signal and came to investigate. Another pause. Partial access granted. Critical systems remain locked. Full access requires command-level authorization from Captain Thomas Reed or designated successor. The holographic displays change, showing detailed scans of the ship. Most systems were damaged, but the ship's core functions and its weapons were intact. Look at this technology, Dr. Foster said in awe, examining the displays. Some of these systems are beyond anything we have even now. How is that possible? The history books got it wrong, Miller said. The Retribution wasn't just propaganda. It was real, and it was far more advanced than anyone knew. As they studied the displays, Wilson's voice came over the radio. Captain, we've reached the engine room. You won't believe what we found. This ship isn't powered by standard fusion drives. It's something else entirely. Something I've never seen before. Document everything, Miller ordered, but don't touch anything yet. As Miller spoke, the bridge lights suddenly brightened, and warning signals flashed across the displays. What's happening? Taylor asked. The AI's voice returned, now more urgent. Warning, defensive systems activating. Unknown entities attempting access to secure areas. Security protocols engaged. There's someone else on board, Miller realized. Computer, identify the unknown entities. Unable to comply. Sensor systems damaged. Threat assessment high. Activating remaining defensive protocols. Throughout the ship, emergency barriers began to close. Lights shifted to a deep red alert status. Everyone, back to the ship now, Miller ordered. As they rushed back through the corridors, Miller heard mechanical sounds ahead, the whir of servos and the heavy tread of metal on metal. Down, he shouted, pulling Taylor behind a bulkhead just as a security drone rounded the corner. It was humanoid in shape, but clearly mechanical, armed with weapons built into its arms. The drone paused, its sensors scanning the corridor. Miller held his breath, praying their environment suits would mask their heat signatures. After what seemed like an eternity, the drone moved on, continuing its patrol. The AI doesn't fully trust us, Taylor whispered. It's treating us as potential threats. We need to find a way to communicate with it properly, Miller said, and we need to wake someone who can give us the command authorization. They made it back to the hangar bay, where the rest of the team was already waiting at their ship. What do we do now, Captain? Taylor asked as they sealed the hatch. Miller looked back at the silent corridors of the Retribution, feeling the weight of history around him. We need to gain its trust, and to do that, we need to learn exactly what happened to this ship and why it's been waiting for 300 years. As their scout ship prepared to leave the hangar, the AI's voice came through their communication system one more time. Warning to unidentified human personnel. The Retribution awakens. Our mission continues. Revenge will be ours. Miller exchanged glances with Taylor. Whatever happened to this ship and its crew, he said quietly, they think they were betrayed, and they've been waiting a very long time to settle the score. Captain Miller sat in the small conference room aboard their scout ship, facing his team. The Retribution loomed outside their viewport, silent and threatening. We need a plan, Miller said. That ship is a historical treasure, but its AI sees us as potential enemies. Commander Taylor nodded. And it mentioned revenge. Revenge against whom? The war with the Varians ended centuries ago. Lieutenant Davis, who had been analyzing the limited data they gathered, spoke up. Captain, I've been reviewing the ship's communication logs that we were able to access. The last entries mention a battle, but not against Varians. Not against Varians. Miller leaned forward. Then against whom? Other humans, Davis said quietly. There are references to traitors and collaborators. The room fell silent as they absorbed this information. The history of the Varian War taught that humanity had united against a common enemy. The idea of human betrayal during that desperate time was shocking. We need more information, Miller decided, and there's only one way to get it. We need to wake someone up. Sir, that's extremely risky, Dr. Foster warned. Those people have been in cryosleep for over 3 centuries, the medical complications alone. I understand the risks, Miller interrupted, but we need answers, and we need someone who can command that AI. After much debate, they agreed on a plan. They would return to the Retribution with medical equipment and attempt to revive the ship's commander, who would likely have the highest authorization level. Hours later, they docked once again with the ancient battleship. This time, the AI did not immediately activate defensive measures, seemingly having assessed they weren't an immediate threat. Computer, Miller called out as they re-entered the ship, we wish to communicate with your commander. We need to revive Captain Reed from cryosleep. There was a long pause before the AI responded. Authorization insufficient for full revival protocols. However, limited communication may be established. Follow illuminated path to Command Cryobay. Lights flickered on along the corridor floor, creating a path deeper into the ship than they had ventured before. It's cooperating, Taylor said, sounding surprised. Why the change? Maybe it's had time to analyze us, Miller suggested, or maybe it's just curious. They followed the lights to a smaller cryobay marked Command SDFF. Inside were just 5 pods, more elaborate than the ones they had seen earlier. The central pod bore the name Admiral Thomas Reed, Fleet Commander. Admiral? Taylor said. The stories always called him Captain. Miller approached the pod. Computer, we request communication with Admiral Reed. Initiating limited revival protocol, the AI announced. Warning, full revival not authorized. Temporary consciousness only. The pod hummed to life. Frost melted away from the transparent cover, revealing the face of a man in his 50s, with a strong jaw and deep lines around his eyes. The pod opened with a hiss, and Reed's eyes fluttered. Dr. Foster rushed forward with her medical scanner. Vital signs stabilizing. Brain activity increasing. He's waking up. Admiral Reed's eyes opened fully, focusing slowly on the faces above him. He tried to speak, but his voice was barely a whisper after centuries of disuse. Water, Foster said, and Davis quickly provided a small cup with a straw. After a few sips, Reed found his voice. Who are you? You're not my crew. Miller stepped forward. Admiral Reed, I'm Captain James Miller of the Human Alliance. We found your ship adrift and followed your distress signal. Reed's eyes narrowed. Human Alliance. What happened to the Federation? Miller exchanged glances with Taylor. Admiral, this may be difficult to hear, but you've been in cryosleep for a very long time. The year is 2752. Reed stared at them, then closed his eyes. 300 years, he whispered. Computer confirm. Confirmed, Admiral. Current timestamp indicates 327 years, 4 months, 18 days since cryo protocol initiation. Reed struggled to sit up, and Foster helped him. The war? The Variants? The war ended 3 centuries ago, Miller said gently. We've been at peace with the Variants for generations. Reed's face hardened. Peace with those monsters. After what they did. History records that both sides were exhausted by the conflict, Taylor explained. A treaty was signed. The Varians retreated to their territory, and humanity rebuilt. And the traitors? Reed asked. What happened to those who betrayed us? Miller hesitated. Admiral, our history doesn't mention any betrayal. The Retribution is barely a footnote, a propaganda story created to boost morale. Reed laughed, a harsh sound. Propaganda? Is that what they call us? The greatest warship ever built, with a crew of 15,000, and they erased us from history. What really happened, Admiral? Miller asked. Why did the Retribution disappear? Reed's eyes burned with old anger. We didn't disappear. We were betrayed. Sabotaged by our own people, high-ranking officials who made secret deals with the Varians. He gestured weakly around him. This ship was humanity's last hope. We had technology decades ahead of anything else, weapons that could end the war in one decisive strike. But the night before our final mission, sabotage struck. They damaged our main drive, our weapon systems. Reed's voice grew stronger as he spoke. We managed to escape, but we were crippled. I made the decision to hide in this sector and put the crew in cryosleep while the automated systems repaired what they could. We left a distress signal that only true allies would recognize. Miller pulled out his old journal. Someone did survive. They wrote this. Reed's eyes widened as he recognized the book. Lieutenant Park. I ordered her to take our last shuttle to tell the truth about what happened. They let her live, Miller explained, but the journal was dismissed as a fake. But I always believed. Reed closed his eyes again, processing everything. And now we're relics of a forgotten war. Not forgotten, Miller said. Misunderstood. But, Admiral, your ship contains technology that's still advanced by our standards. How is that possible? Reed smiled faintly. Project Prometheus. Our scientists made breakthroughs, quantum computing, advanced AI, energy weapons beyond anything we had before. The Retribution wasn't just a battleship. It was a leap forward for humanity. A leap that was buried, Taylor said thoughtfully. If traitors really did betray you to the Varians, then they wouldn't want evidence of their betrayal floating around. They'd want the Retribution forgotten, Miller finished. Reed tried to rise from the pod, but was too weak. I need to see what's become of the world. My crew, can they be revived? With time and proper medical facilities, yes, Foster said, but not all at once, and not here. Admiral, Miller said carefully, you mentioned revenge earlier through your ship's AI. Revenge against whom? The traitors are long dead. Reed's expression darkened. Are they? Computer, full system activation. Authorization Reed, Thomas J. Admiral, Federation ID 9275 Alpha. Around them, the ship hummed. Systems that had been dormant for centuries came online. Lights brightened throughout the vessel. Full access granted, the AI announced. All systems online. Welcome back, Admiral Reed. Show me the Varian Empire, current configuration, Reed ordered. A holographic display appeared, showing a map of known space. The Varian territory glowed red, much larger than Miller had expected. That's not right, Taylor said, studying the map. The treaty limited their expansion. This shows they've doubled their territory. Reed nodded grimly. The betrayal continues. Computer, show military buildup in Varian space over the last 50 years. The display changed, revealing massive fleet movements and weapons installations, all hidden just beyond standard scanning range. Miller stared at the data in shock. They've been preparing for war this entire time, but our intelligence never detected this. Because someone didn't want you to see it, Reed said. The descendants of those who betrayed us. They are still protecting their Varian masters. He locked eyes with Miller. Now do you understand? The revenge isn't just for what happened 3 centuries ago. It's to stop what's about to happen now. Which is what? Taylor asked. Reed's voice was cold. The final elimination of humanity. The plan they've been working toward all along. Captain Miller stood in the Retribution's massive command center, watching as Admiral Reed, now stronger after medical treatment, paced before the holographic displays. In the 12 hours since Reed's revival, the ancient battleship had come fully to life. Systems humming with power that shouldn't have been possible after centuries of dormancy. These readings can't be right, Commander Taylor said, studying the data on Varian military strength. Our intelligence reports showed their fleet at 1/5 this size. Your intelligence is compromised, Reed said flatly, just as ours was before the betrayal. He turned to Miller. Captain, you said humans and Varians have been at peace for centuries. What's the current state of human defenses? Miller hesitated before answering. Most of our military budget was cut decades ago. We maintain a defense fleet, but nothing like what we had during the war. Most of our ships are exploratory or scientific vessels now. Reed's face darkened. Perfect conditions for an invasion. Dr. Foster, who had been monitoring Reed's vitals, looked troubled. Admiral, with all due respect, is it possible your perspective is colored by your experiences? 300 years have passed.